Life story is greater than love story. If I could sum up last week's conversation, if you missed it, and really the entirety of this series, it would be in that one statement right there that your life story is greater than your love story, i.e., the greatest adventure that you'll go on in your life is not your romantic adventure. And we know this because, one, the Bible tells us that the greatest adventure we'll go on is the adventure of knowing Jesus and making him known. But the other reason that I want to talk a little about this morning, why we know that a romantic adventure is not the greatest adventure in the world, is because two of the most influential people in the entire Bible were single. Show of hands if you've ever heard of Jesus or Paul. Anybody ever heard of Jesus and or Paul? Show of hands, that's what I thought. Right? Just think about that for a second. Every single person in this room has heard about Jesus and or Paul. Right? Even those of you who are in the room right now reluctantly because church is not your thing and someone kind of invited you and you felt bad and you came, you've heard of Jesus and Paul. Even those of you who don't believe the Bible. Even those of us in the room who don't read the Bible. Even those of you who were trying to sneak into Bad Boys 2 after you watched your movie earlier and then you realized when it was too late that it was church and it was too awkward to leave and you're like, I'm just going to sit here now and just kind of blend in. You guys, there are people in third and fourth world countries around the world that cannot read that have heard of Jesus and Paul. Do you know why that is? Do you know why pretty much almost everybody and their mom knows who Jesus and Paul are? We know who those people are because they lived a life story that was so compelling, even though they didn't have a love story. We know who those people are because they went on an adventure that was far greater than any romantic adventure you or I could ever go on. We know who Jesus and Paul are because they literally changed the course of history. Even though they were always the groomsmen and never the groom. Life story is greater than love story. And I say that this morning for a couple reasons. One, I say it because I just want to encourage all the single people in the room. Where are you at if you're single? Can I just get a show of hands? And by single, I don't mean like, are you dating or not? Okay, by single, I mean not married. Okay, sorry if you're dating, you're still single in this conversation. Raise your hand high enough. I said this last week. You never know what God will do in the house of God, okay? I mean, that would be a great story. I was single, I raised my hand, and she raised her hand, and, yada, yada, yada. Here we are now. I say this because if you're single, I want to encourage you this morning. I want to remind you that you do not have to be married to fulfill your God-designed destiny. Somebody say amen to that. Somebody ought to praise God, testify, do a little dance in your aisle. And you do not have to be married to change the world. If you don't hear anything else I say today, if you're single, please take that with you. That marriage, or a lack of marriage rather, doesn't disqualify you from changing the world. I want to remind you of that this morning. But I also say all of this because I want to remind those of us in the room who are married that singleness is not less than. That singleness is not sad. Okay, can we just say that out loud to the married people? I mean, hypothetical, but you can say it out loud if you want to, right? I went to Kroger last week. My wife sent me to pick up some vitamin D or something for the kids. And I did what I always do when I go to Kroger. Every time I go to Kroger, it doesn't matter what I go to do at Kroger, I have to pick up Hawaiian rolls. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody love these rolls? It does not matter. It could be an emergency. My wife sends me in. I got to pick up the Hawaiian rolls. All right? I mean, look last night. We got like 3 Hawaiian rolls in there. You just can't. And they put them at the door because they know. They're like, doesn't matter why you're here. Got to pick up them rolls, right? And so I'm going in to pick up vitamin D, quick trip. I see the rolls. I have to stop. I was like, all right, Lord, I can hear you. I see you leading me to these rolls like every time. And so I grabbed them. And next to the rolls, I saw like the sad rolls. You know what I'm talking about? You know how they always have those like rolls that are a little less than, like, because they're a little past their shelf. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they're like, sell by date was like 2 days ago. And so they give you a discount, And they're not bad. They're just kind of sad looking. Right? So I could buy the normal Hawaiian rolls that look fresh, and I could buy the sad-looking rolls. All right, show of hands if you buy the sad-looking rolls, just so I know to never eat what you bring to a potluck, if we ever do a potluck. I know we're not going to say this out loud, but come on now, married folks, be honest. How often do we look at singleness the way I look at sad rolls at Kroger? No, I'm serious. Right? How often do you see a 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, a 33-year-old single person, and your thought is, and maybe you're not going to say this out loud because you don't want to be offensive, and some of you do, and if that's you, I really hope at the end of the day that you stop doing that because it's not helpful. But how often do you see a single person and think to yourself, oh, poor guy, poor girl. You know what I don't get? They're so nice. She's so nice. I don't understand it. Now, I obviously wasn't there when Jesus turned 30. But do you think people looked at him the way we look at single people today? Do you think when Jesus celebrated his 30th birthday, right, he had uncles and aunts and grandmas gathering in the corner just whispering about him? You think they're looking at him like, I don't know what happened. Poor guy. He's so nice too. Like literally the nicest guy you ever meet in the world. Nobody has been nicer. That is a fact. You think we should set him up with Becky? I don't even know if she's his type or he's her type, but he's single, she's single, huh? Yeah, maybe. Right? I don't get it. Right? And he's not a bad-looking guy either. I mean, he's no John Stanton, but still, most of us are not. He's at least a 6 in Nazareth, okay? Maybe in Rome, he's a 4, but he's at least a 6 in Nazareth. I don't understand why he's single, and don't get me started on his potential. Remember that? Right? Remember when he was 12 and he showed up at church? Right, and he's in the lobby with Pastor Ryan and all the other nerds, and they're looking through Scripture, and he's quoting Hebrew and Greek, and everyone's mind is blown away because he's just a teenage kid, and how is he so smart? And we're all looking at each other. We're looking at Joseph like, bro, you better get that carry and conceal bow and arrow because soon enough, all of these dads are going to come start knocking on your door because they want to pledge their daughters to your son. Do you remember that? What happened? I know he went through a little of a rough patch during puberty, but still, who would have thought that he would be 30 and still single, still living at home, still on Joseph's Horizon family plan, still got his Batman pillowcase from college, still never been kissed, still never had anyone swipe right on his profile, still working the furniture department in IKEA. Just kidding. Obviously, Jesus would never work for a company that tortures us with instructions that make no sense. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And products that break after 2 months. Jesus would not be a part of that. It's crazy, isn't it? That the most influential person in the Bible, and if you're here and you're not a church person, I understand if you disagree with this. But those of us who are church people believe that Jesus is the most incredible person to ever walk the face of the earth. And we're not just saying that because that's a nice church answer to say. No, we're saying that because that's true. Nobody has ever walked the face of the earth that is as incredible as Jesus. Isn't it crazy that based on our cultural standards today, Jesus would be on the losing end? Isn't that nuts? That if Jesus were in Toledo, Ohio in 2020, we would look at him and be like, bro, that guy is a loser. One, because he hadn't quite started yet what God called him to do. He didn't begin his ministry yet. And two, he has no romantic adventure to tell anybody. Life's story is greater than love story. And that not only changes how we view singleness, it changes how we view marriage. I said this last week and I'll say it again. This message about singleness has way more to do about your marriage if you're married than you ever imagined. If you missed last week, you need to go listen to the conversation. But we were in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians is a letter that was written by a guy named Paul. Paul was single. Paul wrote this letter to a church in Corinth. Right? And all through Corinthians, Paul talks about everything there is to talk about. It's a fascinating book. In the first 6 verses of 1 Corinthians 7, Paul talks about sex in a way that'll blow your mind. We're not going to read this morning. We're going to read it, I think, this Saturday. If you missed the memo, we're doing, I got to say this right, because last time I said we're doing a sex workshop on Saturday, and that doesn't sound right. We're doing a workshop about God and sexuality, right? On Saturday, I'm telling you, it's going to be great. We're going to spend 4 hours just talking about God and sexuality. I hope you can come be a part of it. It's going to be incredible. I know some of you are not going to like to hear this, but we're not going to record it and put it online. 1, because it's 4 hours long. 2, because we want our video team to be a part of it. And there's just not a whole lot of things in this culture that you can go to and just be a part of the experience. And so for some crazy reason you can't make it, I apologize. Maybe we'll do it again. But I hope you guys join us on Saturday. It's going to be great. First 6 verses, Paul talks about sex. And then after talking about sex, Paul starts to talk about singleness. And he makes a statement that just blows my mind. Check it out. Listen to what he says. We're going to jump in verse 7 here of 1 Corinthians. Paul says this. He says, I wish that all of you were as I am. But each of you, Paul says, has your own gift from God. One has this gift and another has that. If you are taking notes, I want to share 3 things this morning that Jesus and Paul's life tell us about singleness. 3 reminders that we can glean from their life and their words about singleness. And the first is this, that Paul wants us to know through this verse that singleness is a gift and not a superpower. I'm going to say that again. Singleness is a gift, not a superpower. Look at your neighbor and say, it's a gift. ISSAGIFT. It's a gift. 21 Savage. For whoever got that. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. I knew I was going to have one. No one else caught that. David would. So, did you guys notice, by the way, I got a new mic? I don't know if you guys noticed, but yeah, thank you. It's awesome. If you are new here, the mic I used to use looked like my Band-Aid, right? And so the production team, thank you, Bethany, they hooked me up with a mic that matches my skin tone. And now you can't tell where the mic begins and my dread ends. It just looks. I used to call the old mic the Britney mic, and this morning someone had a great idea and said, this is like the Beyonce mic. So I was like, I like that. It was really good. Thank you, Kristen, for that. This is the Beyonce mic, then you're part of my Bayhive. Where are you at, David? Here you go, over there. Appreciate that, buddy. I don't even know where I was talking about mics and skin tone and all of that stuff. It's a gift. Thank you very much. I'm just going to read the Bible. Verse 7. I wish you were as I am, says Paul, but it says each of you has his own gift from God. One has this gift and one has another. Now, don't miss this. Okay, this is huge. Don't miss that what Paul is not saying here is that some people have a unique gift and a unique calling to singleness. Right? There's another passage of the Bible that talks about that, but that's not what Paul is saying here. What Paul is saying here is that there are 2 gifts, and you have one or you have the other. Let me illustrate this for you visually if you're not catching it. I need a volunteer. Where are my single people at? I need a single volunteer. Anybody? There's no hands all of a sudden. 10 minutes ago, there was like 80 hands. Now you're all like, I don't know what it's going to make me do. I'm not going to embarrass you, I promise. Come on, any single person? Anybody want to volunteer? I can't really. I want someone from like the nosebleeds. I need somebody up there. You're all already close to the action. Anybody on that side at all want to volunteer? Anybody? There are no single people in those 3 aisles. They're pointing you out. Is that? I can't tell who that is, but whoever's next to you did this. And so, can you come on off? It's like Price is Right. Come. That's your, okay, tell her to come on down. It's so good. Come on down. I can't tell who it is. Come on, give her a hand. Come on. Hey, is that your daughter? I can't see. Okay, all right. I love how you're like, she's single. Come on down. This is going to be great. I promise I'm not going to put you on the spot or embarrass you too much. What's your name? Ava. Everyone say hi, Ava. Hi, Ava. Thank you for hanging out with us. Ava, you're single, right? Yeah. Okay, you are. Okay. I wasn't sure if you had something to tell your dad. Like, he sent you up there. You're like, surprise. All right, Ava, here's the deal. So you're going to help me preach for a little bit, okay? I promise I'm not going to embarrass you too much. Here's the good news. I got you a gift. Do you like gifts? You guess? Are you shy? Don't worry. It's okay. I promise this is going to be good. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I got the gift. Anybody got the gift? I got you a gift. Where's Shannon? I think she's got it. Can you bring it up? I got you a gift. Not just any gift. I got you a gift from heaven, okay? This is like as good as he can be. Can you bring that up? Okay, look at this. Oh, yeah. I wasn't kidding. Here you go. This is from, yeah, I know. You all wish you raised your hand, didn't you? All the single folks are like, I'm single. Guy's like, I'm not single, but I'll be single for this illustration. Okay, here you go. Do you like Krispy Kremes, by the way? You do? Yeah, you do? Okay, good. I love it. Okay, because if you said no, I was going to send you back to your seat and get someone else. So, okay, so here's the deal. Just hang it. That's for you. You can keep that. Okay, I got that for you, and I got this for myself because I couldn't just buy a Krispy Kreme for someone. I had to get one for myself. Okay, so here's what Paul's saying here. You guys with me? I'm going to read that verse again. He says, I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you, Paul says, has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. What Paul's saying here, if you're not catching it, is that there are two gifts, right? If you're married, guess what? You have a gift. And if you're single, guess what? You have a, say with me, gift. This is it. Paul's saying if you're single, by default, you have been given a gift. And I don't know about you guys, but I always thought when I read this verse or when I heard this verse that Paul was saying that people who just love singleness and they're so content being single and they don't really care about getting married, yeah, those people have a special gift called the gift of singleness. You ever met anyone like that, by the way? Anybody know anybody like that? You ever met somebody, you talk to them about singleness, and you're like, hey, so you think, like, no, I love being single. You're like, yeah, I know, but really, And they're like, no, I'm content. You're like, I know you are, but wink, wink, like, you want me to, like, and they're like, no, like, I am fine. For the longest time, I used to think that those people, those unicorns, those rainbow unicorns, people that love being single had some kind of weird special power, right? And because in high school and in college, I didn't like being single, I concluded, and I don't have the gift of singleness, right? I mean, that's great for those people that have the gift of singleness, but I don't like being single, so I must not have the gift. But what Paul is saying here is a lot simpler than that. Paul is just saying, hey, I just want you to know that if you're married, you have a gift. And we're going to talk about this next week. But if you're single, guess what? You have a gift. But I don't like being single. I know, but you have a gift. Singleness, Paul says, is a gift and not a superpower. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Can you do me one more favor? Can you go sit down and don't eat any? Can you eat one? You can eat one, but don't give any to your dad or anybody else. I'll explain later, okay? So just go sit down with the donuts. Thank you so much. Just hold it for me. I don't trust you. You can hold it for me. I trust you. Singleness is a gift. It's not a superpower. It's an opportunity given to us by God, and Paul will tell us what that is a little bit later. The second thing that Paul shows us in here is that not only singleness a gift, but Paul wants us to know that singleness is a great gift and not a limitation. I want to read you guys verse 7 again. I'm not sure if you caught the first part. This is amazing. Check it out. Paul says, I wish that all of you were as I am. Paul was single. He's saying, I wish you're all single. But each of you has got a gift. Ava's got one. I've got one. Is it me? Does anyone else in here curious why Paul had to add that first part? Right? Because if the point that Paul was making was simply everybody's got a gift, singleness is a gift, marriage is a gift, he could have just said that and be done with it. But Paul didn't just say that. Paul had to first say, just so you know, for the record, FYI, PSA, I wish that you had the gift that I have. I read this the other day, and it reminded me of a conversation that I had with Bebe, our oldest daughter, when she was in high school, and she was in sports. And I don't know, some of you guys know Bebe. We adopted Bebe from Haiti. She's a freakish athlete, like just crazy good, and she went to state her freshman year in track and great at soccer and basketball. And I remember having this conversation because it got to the point where she had to pick what sport to be a part of, right? She's like, Dad, what do you think? You think I should play soccer or these other sports, right? And I said, I'm not gonna tell you what to play because I want you to pick, and it's your choice, and you're an adult. But I would love it if you picked soccer. But you don't got to pick soccer. I mean, if you're into basketball or volleyball, any of those other sports that are okay, you can pick it. I'll be okay. I'll be proud of you just as much as I'm proud of you right now. But if you really, really, really want to know what I think, I would love it if you pick soccer because that's my life. I love soccer. I've loved soccer all of my life. I have dreamed of being a part of something like this, but no pressure. You can pick whichever one you want. I'm just letting you know it would be great if you picked soccer because I love soccer and you're really good at soccer. What Paul is saying here is that both are a gift, but if I had a choice, and this is crazy, I wish, he says, that you were as I am. Paul is saying to the Corinthian church, if I could pick, you can pick whichever one you want. They're both gifts. But I wish that you were single. Do you know why Paul says that? The reason Paul says that is the same reason, and we looked at this last week, why Paul told the men in Corinthian church not to look for a wife. The reason Paul says that is not because Paul thinks marriage is bad or Paul is not for marriage. No, the reason Paul says that is that, one, Paul believes that singleness is a great gift. And the reason Paul believes singleness is a great gift is because Paul believed that singleness can be catalytic for living a life story in a way that marriage cannot. Can I show you? Skip down with me to verse 32. Listen to what he says. This is mind-blowing. Verse 32. He says, I would like you, Paul says, to be free from concern. Okay, this is after he told them that, hey, those of you who are married, who face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you of this, right? Some of you thought that was real funny last week, and hopefully you had a fun ride home with your spouse, asking you why you were laughing. Paul says, I want you to be free from concern. Listen to this. This is mind-blowing. He says, an unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man, on the other hand, is concerned about the affairs of this world and how he can please his wife. Somebody say amen. And this is amazing. I don't believe this is in the Bible. This is crazy. I'm glad you appreciate that, Alex. His interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit, but a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. Then listen to how he summarizes this. He says, I am saying all this for your good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. Obviously, I wasn't there when they read this letter to the church for the first time in Corinth. But I wonder how the married people responded. Right? I wonder how the newlyweds responded when Paul made the argument that singleness gives us an opportunity to lean into God and into life's story in a way that we cannot if we are married. Let me read verse 35 to you again, just so you don't think you imagined it. Paul says, I'm saying all this stuff about singleness for your good, not because I want to restrict you. Why? Because I want you to live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. Now, please don't miss the point. Paul is not saying that if you're married, you cannot be devoted to the Lord. Or to put it in context of our conversation, Paul is not saying that if you're married, then you cannot live a compelling life story. That's not what he's saying. What Paul is saying, are you ready for this? Is that if you are married, it is harder to live in devotion to the Lord. And if you are married, it is harder to lean into life story. Not going to ask for a show of hands because that would be really awkward. And my guess is there's not a whole lot of married people who want to admit this out loud. Chances are you may not even want to admit it to yourself. But I wonder how many of us in here, if we were just brutally honest, again, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or tell anybody, but if you could just be honest to yourself, would admit that, you know what? He's right. Paul is right, and I know it not just because Paul said it and the Bible said it. No, I know Paul is right because that is my story. I wonder how many of you in here, if you were honest, those of you who are married, would say, you know what? Before I was married, I was one way. And then I got married and I was another way, but not in a good way. I had this conversation with my wife, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And my wife and I spent, I don't know, years and years doing college ministry and young adult ministry. And we were talking about this, and I said, babe, isn't it crazy to look back at so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and fill in the blanks? Isn't it crazy to look back at what they were like when they were in college, in their 20s? Do you remember? Like they were on fire? And you would look at them and you get around them and you'd be like, wow, I just want to hang around you more because when I'm around you, there's just something unmistakable about God's call on your life. You remember that? You remember those guys that we would look at him and go, wow, that person clearly has a life story. They clearly have a calling and a destiny for their life. They are almost literally on fire. And then they got married. And yes, I know a part of that is, growing up and getting the job, and you can't do life like you did in college and when you were in 20s and got to pay bills now, got kids, and got to take care of the family. And those aren't bad things. But guys, that's kind of the point that Paul is making. That's kind of the point. The point that he's making in here is that it is harder. Now, those of you last week who were a little too excited to find out that we're not going to be married in heaven, before you get any funny ideas, and we're going to talk about this, I think, next week, Paul goes on to talk about marriage, and he lets us know that the solution is not to bail. Okay, and this is not the marriage talk, but I'm going to slide this in here. That if you're in a marriage right now and you're like, there's just no life story, there's just no mission, and it's just kind of weak, and you're right, Sammy, I was this way, and then I married her, or I married him, and all of a sudden I'm this way, and I'm not as devoted to the Lord and life story. If that's you, the solution is not to bail. Okay, the good news, if that's you, is that your marriage can and ought to resonate the greatest story in the world. It ought to point to Jesus, and we're going to talk about that next week. And my hope is that everybody in here who is married can one day soon look back and go, wow, my marriage is bigger than my marriage. Yes, we have a love story, but what we're a part of is so much bigger than our tiny little love story. I hope that happens if you're married. But the other thing that I hope happens, the thing that I hope happens first today, is that those of you who are in here, who are single, can walk out of here today knowing, not just because I said it, not just because the Bible says it, but knowing in your heart, because God stirred something inside of you today, that you would walk out of here knowing that your singleness is not only a gift, but your singleness is a great gift. And the reason your singleness in this season is a great gift is because it is a catalyst for leaning into the story of Jesus and knowing Jesus and making him known in a way that some of us married folks cannot lean in. I hope you carry yourself a little bit differently as a single person. A couple days ago, my daughters were doing a little cheerleading clinic at Northview High School's JV basketball game, and we went to watch them, and it was great. It was really fun. It was cute. And my wife and I were talking about it afterwards, and my wife's like, it's so interesting because Eden and Nora, she's like, they're so different. She's like, Eden's up there, and you can just tell she just loves cheerleading, and she's just like waving the pom-poms. She's just having the time of her life. But it's a little different with Nora. She likes it too, but Nora's got a little she's got, what I'm talking about? Like my wife's like, she's like, do you notice that? I'm like, yeah. Like she's got a little soul, a little something in her step. She just looks like she's just like jiving off there. You're like, okay, I see you. All right? She's walking a little bit differently. My hope and my prayer for all the single people who are in the room today is that hopefully God will do something this morning that will cause you to walk a little bit differently. I hope that when you walk out of those doors this morning, that you walk out different than you came in. I hope you walk a little bit differently, not because your relationship status has changed between the time you walked in and left, even though if it did, that would be amazing. Please let us know, shoot us an email so we can celebrate that win. But chances are that's not going to be the case. And my hope is that you would walk out a little bit different today, knowing in your heart that you have a great gift. Knowing in your heart that your singleness is not a limitation. That you would walk out here today knowing that you can do everything that God wants you to do. And perhaps, more importantly, if you're single, I hope you walk out of here today knowing that not only does God have a call on my life, and not only does God have a destiny for me, and not only can I not do anything, but guess what else if I'm single? Guess what else? I've got something that everybody needs and everybody wants. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, I might be single. I may not be married. I'm not sure if I don't have a love story yet. But guess what you got, Ava? You've got something that everybody wants and everybody needs. Right? And what's amazing about this gift of singleness when you look in the Bible is that the Bible would teach us that just like marriage, the gift of singleness is not for ourselves. Right? What makes the gift of singleness an amazing gift is that not only is it catalytic for us to lean into God's story, but it gives us something that people could never have outside of that. This is so good. Do you want me to give one to your dad or no? He was kind of mean to you earlier, but here you go. She's like, I guess. You didn't even eat one. You take the first one. Come on, please take the first one. Here you go. Would you guys like some? Anybody else like some donuts in here? Awesome. You guys want some up there? Would you like? You're looking like, okay, here, just one. How about you guys? Would you guys like some? Don't be shy. Yeah, she's like, yeah, I'll take one. Here you go. Anybody else want donuts? Are you guys donut people? Are you healthy people? Okay, healthy people. Your husband's like, I'll take a donut, right? Anybody else want donuts in here? You want some donuts over there? Okay, do you mind if I touch it? I don't want to bring the box over here. I want to leave the box with her and she can give to whoever she wants. Is that okay if I touch it? Here you go. You can have the rest of the donuts. Everybody give her a hand. That's awesome. There you go, bro. Singleness is a gift. Singleness is a great gift that God gives us for the sake of others. It's not a superpower. It's not a limitation. I don't know about you guys, but not only do I want to be a part of a church where single people see their singleness as a gift, where single people believe they have something to offer, but I want to be a part of a church where those of us who are married see singleness the way Paul did. Anybody else? Right, can I just talk to the married folks for a little bit? How amazing would it be for us to be a part of a church and a part of the community where we don't look at singleness like the sad roles? What if we started looking at singleness as the gift that it is? What if we started looking at single people as more than their relationship status? What if the next time you saw that single person, the first thought that comes in your mind is not, man, I ought to set him up, and that's so sad, but he's so nice, and she's so nice. What if the first thought is like, wow, you have an incredible gift, and you bring something significant to the table, and you have something to offer, and I have a whole lot that I can learn from you. Singleness is a great gift and not a limitation. And the last point I want to just sit on here is that singleness is a great gift, but it's also really beautiful and really hard. Singleness is a great gift that's really beautiful and really hard. It's both and not one or the other. Singleness is beautiful because, man, like Paul says, it gives you a unique opportunity to just lean into God like you couldn't if you were married. Singleness is a great gift because it's a catalyst for life's story. But can we just take a minute, church, and just acknowledge this morning that singleness is also really, really hard. Singleness is hard for many reasons. Number one, singleness is hard in the church because pastors like me have lied on stage when we told the single people that, hey, if you do A, B, and C, then God will give you D. Singleness is hard because we've preached sermons that set people up for disappointment. Singleness is hard because we've promised people things that Jesus never promised. Singleness is hard because the church hasn't done the best job of integrating single people into the community. Singleness is hard because those of us who have married have not done the best job at seeing, sitting down, and listening to the single people in our community. Singleness is beautiful, yes, but singleness is also hard. Because for the most part, the church has asked single people to do something that even Jesus himself never attempted to do. I want to read you guys briefly just a couple verses in Matthew chapter 26. If you're not familiar with this narrative, Jesus is about to go to the cross. Right? He's literally about to die on the cross, and it's the moment before Jesus is arrested, and we see Jesus in the garden. And I just want to read this to you guys. I've read this many times, I feel like, in the last year, but this is just so good. Listen. He says, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. He said to them, his friends, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, Jesus said, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. This is Jesus. He's like, my soul is overwhelmed. He says, stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little farther, the writer tells us that Jesus fell with his face to the ground and he prayed, my Father, if it is possible, will you please take this cup from me? Yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he came back again to his disciples. He found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watching me for an hour, he said to Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And then he went a second time and prayed, my Father, if it is possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. Verse 43, when he came back, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and once more prayed a third time, saying the same thing. There's so much I love about this narrative. First of all, I love the vulnerability that Jesus shows. Right? I love the vulnerability. I love that Jesus wasn't just like, hey, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. The cross is coming. Ain't this amazing? No, I love that Jesus was honest. I love that he was on his face and he was sorrowful and he was troubled. And he cried out to God and said, God, I don't think I want to do this. I love that he was vulnerable. But the other thing I love is that this passage gives those of us in the room, those of you in the room who are single and struggling, permission to be honest with God. Okay, and if you're here and you're single, you don't need permission from, a married guy, a pastor. You don't need me to tell you what's okay. But if for some reason you've been waiting for someone to just kind of give you that, okay, can I just tell you that you have permission to be honest with God about your singleness? Okay, singleness is a gift. Doesn't mean that you just walk around with a smile on your face and go, I just love being single. This is amazing. No, sometimes singleness as a gift means that you do what Jesus did, that you fall on your face and say, God, I know this is the gift you've given me. I know this is the season that you've given me, but I don't like it, and I want you to know, is there another way? I love his vulnerability. I love the permission he gives us. But the other thing I love about this passage is I love that it reminds those of us who are married that we have an opportunity to be there for the single folks. I love it because it's a reminder that singleness does not mean alone. Let me say that again because somebody needs to take that and put it in your back pocket and pull it out in a couple days when you start to freak out. Singleness does not mean alone. Yes, Jesus was single, but what we see in Matthew 26 is Jesus is saying, just because I'm single doesn't mean that I have to be alone. Lonely, yes. But how many of you guys know there's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely? How many of you guys know that? That it's one thing to be alone, It's another thing to feel lonely. And just to throw this out there, if you're single in the room, please, I'm not trying to patronize you by saying this. I just want you to know that I wouldn't do that in a conversation like this. I'm not up here to say that it's not, that being married doesn't help loneliness, because it surely does. But I think if you're single and you've ever been tempted to think that marriage solves it, I think you will be shocked to find out that probably most of the most lonely people in this room are married. I think it would shock you to find out that most of your married friends that you're looking at struggle with loneliness. You know why that is? Because loneliness is a human condition. Loneliness is something that we all wrestle with regardless of our relationship status. Yes, marriage and having someone there surely does help. But I think there's somebody in here today, and maybe a whole lot of us in here today, that God is just trying to just create a shift in your mind. God's trying to remind you that loneliness and being alone are two different things. And so you can be single and feel lonely just like a lot of us feel lonely. But the good news this morning, church, is that whether you're married or single, none of us have to be alone. I'm going to say that again. So I was hoping for more than one that's right there. Because I've been a pastor for a while now, and I know there's a whole lot of people who came in this room today believing that they were alone. And I'm telling you right now, you never have to be alone. And you never have to be alone for two reasons. Number one, Jesus promised to never leave you. Right? That was the one thing he said before he left. I will be with you always. It's the song that we just sang. Even when we're in the fire, there's always someone else with us. But church, it gets better than that. Not only are we never alone because Jesus is with us, we are never alone because Jesus has given us a gift called the church. And like Aaron said earlier, church is not an event that you show up to once a week to feel good about yourself. No, church is a family that you belong to. And in the church of God, nobody should ever be alone. Even when we struggle with loneliness. So what does this mean practically? So glad you asked, because I have an answer. I think it means a couple things. I think from the staffing, organization side, I think it means that we have to do a better job. And I'm just being honest with you. We have to do a better job at integrating people together in our church. And just to give you a little peek behind the scenes, we have spent, Alex can tell, 6 months, 7 months talking about Welcome to Church. Like meetings upon meetings upon meetings and emails, countless text conversations, intense conversations, because we realize that we have to do a better job at assimilating people at Soma City Church. A whole lot of people are showing up, and we're thankful for that. But in order for people to not feel like they are alone, we got to do a better job at connecting people. And we haven't done the best job at that. And I'm telling you that. And that's my responsibility as the leader. We haven't done the best job that we can do at connecting people. But I'm here to tell you this morning that we've been working hard at it. And we've been trying our best. And our hope is that this next season is different for our church. It's the reason you've heard so much about Welcome to Church. Welcome to Church is not just another event that we just wanted to put together. We didn't do Welcome to Church because we were bored. We came up with Welcome to Church because we want to create an environment for people to be integrated into the family of God. And so if you feel alone, if you feel like you're walking solo, if you feel like you're not connected, will you come? Will you put yourself in a context where we can connect you to other people who can be with you in the garden? I think it means that we got to organize better organizationally. I got to do a better job at leading our team to do that. I think the second thing that it means, though, I think it has to go deeper than the organization. I think for us to be able to experience a healthy community of marrieds and singles, I think that it has to translate into our personal lives. For those of you who are single, can I just challenge you a little bit? And I'm trying to be careful because I haven't been single for a long time, And so I just want you to know that I want to be sensitive to that. But can I just challenge you for a little bit? Maybe, could it be that God is saying in this season, I want you to do what Jesus did? Could it be that your next step is to say, hey, instead of getting in my car and going back to my apartment and just crying by myself and having a hard time by myself, that God is saying, hey, will you do what Jesus did? Will you call somebody? Will you text somebody? Will you say, hey, I don't want to be alone right now. I can't be alone right now. I'm having a hard time and I need help. And to those of us on the other side, those of us who are married, could it be that God is saying to us this morning that I want you to do what the disciples didn't do in this story? Jesus kept going to them and they kept falling asleep. What a metaphor for how the church has treated single people. Could it be that God is saying to those of us who are married, hey, I need you to wake up. And I need you to not just look at single people like, oh man, that's kind of sad. No. I want you to see them the way I see them. I want you to see them without limitation. And I want you to think about intentional ways to integrate single people into your rhythm and into your family life. I sat down last week with a number of single people in our community. And somebody said, honestly, somebody said he doesn't do a great job at this. And I'm like, you're right. Right? I don't do a great job at this. In fact, I can only think of one person, really. There's probably more. But in that moment, I could only think of one person. I don't know if Keith and Tina are in here. And I hate to say your names because I don't want everybody to kind of put you on blast. But if I could just honor you guys do an amazing job. I mean, come on now, at integrating single people into your family. Like pretty much half the room that I sat down to talk to about singleness were like, yeah, Tina and Keith, man, they do a fantastic job at integrating people into their families. And my wife and I had a family meeting last week, and we talked about this. I'm like, man, we got to do a better job at integrating. Right, we better do a better job at seeing, at listening, at opening our hands. I said to my wife, I think our kids need more uncles and aunties. Anybody grew up in a family like that? I mean, I told this to our staff. People come up to me and they say, hey, how many brothers and sisters do you have? I have a hard time answering that question. Not because I don't know how many biological brothers and sisters I have a hard time answering because I grew up in a home where my mom just folded everybody into our family and everybody was my uncle and my auntie. Right? And it wasn't until I left the house and I was like, hey, we're not even related to that guy. That's some random guy that mom met at the church and just came over every time. What does it look like to integrate? I wrote down a few examples, and then we'll be out of here in a minute. Married people, what would it look like for you to look at your schedule and say, what would it look like for me to integrate some more single people in the community into what we do? Right, my wife and I and our kids, we do some pizza night almost every Friday with the kids, and they get to pick a movie. We're like, man, we should invite people here. We should invite some single folks in here. Right? I remember Jaron came over one time, and we just sat on the couch, and we're watching basketball. Right? And it was just so great. Like, it was so fun. What would it look like for us to open our eyes to see the single people in our community? Not to bring up relationships every single time, but to see that there's way more to them than their relationship status. To invite them, to give them a seat, to give them a voice, to listen, to ask really good questions. Can you imagine, church, what would we look like if those of us who are connected in biological families locally and those of us who are married added extra seats during Thanksgiving because we know that there are people in our church that don't have anywhere to go during Thanksgiving because we're that close to the action that we're inviting people in. Imagine what it would be like if when you're thinking of godparents for your kids, you're not just thinking about all your other married friends, that you're pulling single people in and asking them to fill that role. Because you know that their singleness is not a superpower. It's not a limitation. It is a gift. And you're doing it not because you feel bad. You're doing it because singles, have a part to play in God's story. You're doing it because life story is greater than love story. What would it look like for us to integrate, to see, listen, and to love better? Some of you in here, that next step is coming to welcome the church. I know this sounds so self-serving. I don't really care. this is the place to get connected. Doesn't matter if you've been coming since we started Soma City Church, or if today is your first time, that you should have texted that number and say, I want to integrate myself. And maybe you don't need it, but guess what? There's probably someone else that needs you. And you can be a part of that. For some of you, it's just being honest about how hard it is to be single, having that conversation with God, and then maybe doing what Jesus did, looking around you and say, I need to share this burden with somebody else. Life story is greater than love story. And we know that because Jesus and Paul changed the freaking world. Because their life story was so compelling. We are here today because of them. And my prayer is that God would do something this morning that would ripple generations from now. Jesus, I thank you for all the single people who are in this community. I thank you, God, that you see them in a way that we don't. I thank you, God, for the destiny and the call that you have on their lives, Jesus. I thank you that there is no limitation, there is no holdback. Thank you for seeing things where we may not see things. Thank you for the gifts that you've given Soma City Church and the singles that are in this community, God. And we just agree with you this morning that none of this would be the same without them. I just pray, God, that you would meet them where they are. That all the singles in the room who are struggling, God, would know that they have a heavenly Father who understands, who has compassion for them, and who wants what's best, even when it's hard. I pray that nobody in this room would ever feel alone. That in the moments where we struggle with loneliness, you will remind us that we are never alone. I pray for all the married folks in the house, God. And I just want to start by just confessing that I haven't done a really good job at this at all. But God, will you give us the grace to open our eyes, to see, to integrate, to press in, love well, to listen well, and to see people the way that you see all of us. I pray for all my friends in the room, Jesus, who may not know you. You're the greatest person the world has ever known. And we invite you. We know you're here. Change our lives. Change our worlds.